to firefighters, 2 men bound by duty, and a silence heavier than their gear. The siren rips through the night, sending them into a forest blaze where smoke blinds, heat suffocates, and every breath feels borrowed. Shoulder to shoulder, they fight an enemy that devours everything until the fire turns and traps them in a wooden shed. With flames clawing closer, masks fogging, and radios fading, words finally break freakin', fashions long buried beneath uniforms and fear. Their voices tremble, their hands touch, and suddenly the fire is the only danger burning between them. A desperate kiss, a vow whispered in the smoke, a heartbeat that refuses to surrender. Outside, the roar of the inferno drowns the world inside. 2 souls cling to each other like it's their last night alive. But when the sky opens with the thunder of engines, a narrow chance appears. Will they seize it, or will the fire claim more than the forest? The firehouse always carried that late afternoon stillness, the kind that made every sound sharper. The walls hummed with leftover heat, a ceiling fan spun lazily above, and somewhere in the corner the coffee machine clicked as if reminding us it was still alive. I sat on the bench across from the lockers with Durek, pretending to read the duty log, pretending because the quiet between us had its own weight. It wasn't awkward, it was charged, like the silence before a storm, another night without sleep. I asked, flipping a page I didn't really see. He smirked. Look who's talking. Forecast says dry winds tomorrow. Forest's a tinderbox. Fires love a good promise, I muttered, and our eyes met for just a second too long. I looked away first. In that look was every unsaid thinger late. Night shifts, the way laughter lingered after roll call, the brush of his arm against mine in the cramped cab. There was always a line drawn between us, invisible but thrumming like a live wire. Then the siren ripped through the quiet. That sound didn't ask permission, it tore you out of thought and dropped you straight into action. We moved at once. The dispatch call echoed through the intercom. Wildfire, Northern Ridge. Units respond. Boots slammed against concrete. Jackets yanked down, air packs clattered. I knew the rhythm by hearth-helmet strap, gloves, tools. And I knew his rhythm even better. Durek was a half step ahead, as always. I recognized the shape of his back in turnout gear as easily as my own hands. Engines roared to life. Diesel fumes filled the bay as we climbed into the truck. The station blurred away, sirens howling into the night. I strapped in, glanced sideways, and saw the reflection of red strobes in Durek's eyes. You good? He asked over the noise. Always, I said, and meant it in ways I couldn't admit. By the time we reached the ridge, smoke rose like a gray wall against the fading sky. Command briefed us fast. Flames pushing through underbrush, wind shifting hard, spot fires breaking past the line. Threat of crown fire if it jumped the clearing. We'd work in pairs, of course. We were a pair. We always were. He handled the nozzle, I backed him with the line. He leaned into the fire, I leaned into him. It was muscle memory, his steady stance, my weight keeping the hose alive, the unspoken sync of 2 bodies moving as one. We stretched line through blackened grass, coupling clanging against rock. Water surged, hissing when it hit the earth, steam rolling up with the smell of scorched pine. Durek dropped to a knee, sweeping the stream across burning brush, and I fed him slack, muscles burning. The wind turned sly, first a push, then a shove, then a choke of hot air against our masks. The thermal imager glowed with new hot spots, bright white blooms erupting faster than we could stomp them. Left flanks breaking, someone yelled, we pivoted, sprinting through half, burned scrub, flames leapt like predators, chasing oxygen. Durek shot me a look unflinching. In it was everything. We've got this, stay close, and maybe something more. Something that lived deeper than fire codes and shift rosters. The roar of the forest swallowed voices. All I heard was the rush of our boots, the whip of water, the pounding inside my chest. His hand brushed my arm once, steadying me when the hose snagged. Just a second of touch through gloves, but it burned hotter than the sparks around us. Then the wind betrayed us. Smoke sank low, thick and suffocating, and the fire line surged forward as if dragged by invisible ropes. Fall back to the break, command barked over the radio. Copy, Durek answered, already pulling me with him. Stay tight. We ran. The hose snaked behind, catching roots. Heat chased at our backs, a living thing, faster than any of us. Ahead loomed a small outbuilding in old tool shed, tin roof and wooden frame. Not a fortress, but better than open ground. This way, Durek shouted. We slammed through the door, dropped the latch, and the world shrank to 4 walls, shadows, and smoke curling through cracks. My breath rattled in the mask. Durek braced the door with his shoulder. I keyed the radio. Engine 6 to command, I rasped, voice shaking with static. We're trapped inside a structure, coordinates transmitting, requesting immediate air support, 2 firefighters inside, the radio crackled unanswered. Inside that shed, the space between us closed even more. Every breath he took was in my ears, louder than the fire outside. I felt the weight of all we'd never said pressing harder than the smoke. Hey, Durek murmured without looking at me. As long as we're together, this fire counts us double. I almost laughed, but my throat was dry. The truth was, I wasn't afraid because of the flames. I was afraid of losing the chance to tell him. Outside, the forest screamed, trees splitting, embers swirling like angry stars. Inside, it was just the two of us, waiting for the sky to open. And then, faint at first, came the deep rumble of an aircraft engine low, steady, like a second heartbeat. Durek lifted his head. I followed. Hope sounded like wings. The shed groaned under the weight of the fire, pressing from all sides. Smoke clawed through every crack in the boards, filling the air with a bitter sting that coated my throat. My radio sputtered back once, then died in static. Durek braced his shoulder against the door, helmet tilted down, every muscle in his arms taut with effort. I crouched near him, trying to keep the line of communication alive, but the fire outside was louder than our voices. Command, this is Engine 6. We're cut off repeat, cut off requesting immediate airdrop. I shouted, but the radio only hissed, mocking. For a moment all I could hear was the fire itself. It wasn't noise anymore, it was language. The crack and pop of timber, the furious hiss of resin exploding, the low guttural roar like a beast that wanted us swallowed whole. Durek turned his head slightly toward me, his face streaked with soot beneath the mask. Well, get through, he said, calm as stone. We always do. I wanted to believe him, but the way the walls radiated heat, it felt like the world outside was folding in. I sat back against the opposite wall, helmet knocking wood, and let my lungs drag in slow, shallow breaths. Remember the first night shift we pulled together? I asked suddenly, the words escaping before I thought better of them. Kitchen coffee, stale donuts, you kept talking about your high school baseball days like I cared. He smirked, lips chapped, eyes lit by the orange glow pushing through the cracks. And you pretended not to care, but you asked about it the next day. The shed creaked. Ash fell from the rafters like gray snow. I felt the weight of time shift inside me. If this was the end, I couldn't leave words unsaid. Durek I hesitated, throat burning. If we make it out, I don't want to keep this thing between us unspoken. He looked at me for a long second, the firelight catching in his eyes. Then he crossed the shed in 2 steps, dropped to a crouch in front of me, and pressed his gloved hand against my chest, right over my racing heart. I've been waiting for you to say that, he murmured, because I feel it too, every damn shift, every time you're standing next to me in the line. The heat pressed harder, forcing us closer together in the narrow space. The world shrank until it was just his breath mingling with mine, smoke and adrenaline, and something tender that had been buried too long. I pulled off my mask for half a second, reckless, desperate. His hand slid to the back of my neck, rough glove against sweat, and then his lips were on mine smoke, stained urgent but real. For a fleeting instant, it felt like we weren't trapped in a shed at all. We were infinite, but the fire didn't care about us. A beam cracked overhead, showering sparks down. The walls pulsed with heat. Our kiss broke, both of us gasping, our faces blackened with soot. We can't sit here and wait to roast, Durek said, voice sharp now. There's always a way. As if answering him, a thunderous roar swept across the sky. The ground trembled. Through the gaps in the boards, I caught sight of a massive shadowing's engines. The water drop came down in a furious crash, drenching half the ridge. The shed rattled as liquid thunder hammered the roof, cold spray bursting through the seams. The sudden hiss of quenched fire was deafening. Durek ripped the door open. Steam poured inside, swirling around us. And there, just beyond, was a narrow gap in the inferno of fleeting corridor of scorched earth, not yet swallowed by flames. We run, he said, eyes blazing, no looking back. I nodded, pulling the mask tight again. Together we bolted from the shed, boots hammering mud still wet from the water drop. The fire snarled at both sides, towering walls of heat and light. The corridor was shrinking even as we sprinted. Halfway through, Durek stumbled. A branch cracked above, showering sparks, and a wall of flame curved in. His arm jerked back, and I saw his turnout sleeve flare fire, licking his arm like it wanted to claim him. No, I roared, throwing myself toward him. I tackled him hard, rolling us into the mud. I beat at the flames with my gloves, smothering them as the smell of burnt fabric filled the air. He cried out, body twisting in pain, but I didn't let go. I dragged him to his feet, slung his arm over my shoulder, and forced us forward. My lungs screamed, my legs burned, but I wouldn't let the fire take him. Not now, not ever. At last we broke through the line, stumbling into the blackened clearing beyond. Engines wailed in the distance. Crew members waved, running toward us. Strong arms took Durek from me, lifting him onto a stretcher. I collapsed to my knees in the ash, hands trembling, heart breaking. The last thing I saw before they loaded him into the medevac was his face, pale beneath the soot, his lips forming words only I could hear. "Don't leave me," and I swore I wouldn't. Not in this life, not in any. The helicopter's rotors faded to a low throb long after they wheeled Durek through the sliding doors. Bright ceiling tiles skimmed overhead. Someone cut away what remained of his turnout sleeve. The smell of wet ash and antiseptic fought in the Air Forest and hospital trying to share one breath. They split us at the trauma bay. I stood with a stack of forms I didn't read while voices rose behind the doors. Numbers called, meds checked, a calm that sounded like courage rehearsed too many times. When they let me in, he was wrapped in silver dressings. His right arm and shoulder were swaddled from wrist to collarbone. A clear mask fed humid air, fogging with each shallow rise of his chest. "Hey," I said, because quieter felt stronger. Here, his eyes cracked open. Soot shadowed the corners like a memory that wouldn't leave. "Don't go," he whispered. I slid my fingers under the bandage along his wrist where the skin was still cool. Not going anywhere. They moved him to the burn unit as night fell. The city outside a smear of sodium lights. A resident outlined the plan in steel, voice sentences, fluids, pain control, monitoring for inhalation injury, surgery to debride and graft when margins were clear. He spoke in probabilities, I answered in promises. I slept in a chair that didn't want me, a thin blanket over gear that still smelled of smoke. At 2 a.m., Durek stirred. I woke to the small sound of his teeth chattering pain, doing math under the skin. I rested my forehead against his, careful of tapes and tubes. "Breathe with me," I murmured, and we counted seconds, building a bridge out of numbers. Morning was warmer. He knew I was there before he opened his eyes because his hand searched for mine the way a tree finds light. The charge nurse smuggled humor into the room like contraband. "You boys gave half the county a scare," she said. "Next time, bring donuts." Durek managed a quick smile that broke me cleanly in two. During the dressing change, I stepped back while the team worked loved hands gentle and exact. I learned new words on the wall. Partial thickness, full thickness, deep acronyms that pretended this was just paperwork. Pain carved hollows in his face, his jaw clenched and unclenched. I kept talking because voice is a kind of anesthesia. I told him about the coffee machine at the station, the rookies arguing about chili, the hose you always leave straight or else. He listened, then said, "If that doorway opens, I want to walk through it with you." Silence changed shape. "You mean I don't want to pretend anymore." His eyes were sea glass bright. "When they discharge me, we go to City Hall, suits, bad vows, good cake. I want a ring that knocks on the table when I set my hand down. I want what we almost lost." Future flared in my chest like oxygen on coals. I smiled, because hope deserved to see teeth. "Okay," I said. "City Hall, suits, your ring knocks, mine hums. We'll fight about cake flavors and lose on purpose. Make it simple," he said, drifting. "Blue tie, navy, the one y'd pick and pretend you didn't." I laughed, a sound I hadn't trusted since the fire. "Navy it is." The surgeon came by with a map of tomorrow. "First pass in the or at 11, she said. "Well clean, devitalized tissue, evaluate depth, place initial grafts where viable." She had the kind of hands that build outcomes. I believed in them because I needed somewhere to set my belief when mine felt too heavy. As the sun sagged behind the hospital, the room went the color of a pocketed coin. Pumps sighed. I read to him from a dog-eared paperback short chapters that land softly. He dozed, surfaced, dozed again. The drugs pulled the tide one way while my voice tugged it back. Between pages, I studied the nick at his hairline from some long ago ladder, the way his lashes refused the seriousness of the room. The world narrowed to the square footage of his breath. Everything outside could wait its turn. Close to midnight, rain began, thin percussion on the window that felt like absolution. I watched the parking lot blur, red and white lights smearing into watercolor. Behind me, Durek said, "Come here," like a prayer that already knew it would be answered. I sat at the edge of the bed and cradled his bandaged hand. He squeezed, careful and fierce. "If tomorrow hurts," he whispered, "tell me it's only a day." "It's only a day," I said. "If I forget the sound of trees," he said, "tell me they are still there." "They are still there," he swallowed. "If I'm scared, it'll be braver," I said, and felt it become true as I said it. Nurses ghosted in and out. Monitor steadied, a patient constellation. I rested my head beside his arm and finally drank the cold water, finishing the last warm inch like a dare against sleep. We didn't talk about the shed or the exact second our mouths found each other between smoke and splinters. We talked about small things that could fit inside tomorrow, the navy tie, a modest bouquet on a courthouse step, the way his last name would sound when it belonged to me too. When he drifted off, I stayed and counted his breaths. Outside the rain quit, and far off a siren rose and fell, going toward someone else's worst moment. Before dawn, a nurse dimmed the lights to almost dark. I thought of the shed the way hope had sounded like wings. In the hush of the burn unit, it sounded like this, one sleeping breath, then another, then another. A promise added to a promise until morning found us both. Hospitals had their own kind of siren alarms that went off not for fires, but for bodies losing balance. They wailed, reset, wailed again. That morning it was Derek's turn for the operating room, and the corridor echoed with rolling wheels and clipped instructions. I walked beside the gurney, trying not to hold his hand too tight. His skin was pale against the white sheets, but his eyes stayed on me. "Blue tie," he whispered, a smile tugging at cracked lips. "Don't forget." As if I could, I said. My throat ached. They took him behind swinging doors, and I was left staring at a wall the color of bone. Hours stretched like wire pulled too thin. I paced, I sat. I prayed to gods I never named. When the surgeon finally returned, her mask pulled down, her eyes carried news like stones in her pockets. "We cleaned the burns," she said, "grafted where we could. Some areas will need repeat attempts. He's stable, but this will be a long road. Stable." The words sounded like victory and defeat at once. Back in his room, Durek was still under anesthesia, wrapped in bandages like a soldier brought home from a war only we had seen. Machines hummed and dripped life into him. I sat down and read his chart, though none of it made sense. What I understood was the rise and fall of his chest, fragile but stubborn. By evening he stirred. Pain cracked his face in two, but when his eyes found me, something softer mended it. "Still here, always," I said. The next days blurred. Nurses changed dressings. I learned the difference between silence that meant concentration and silence that meant pain. Durek tried to joke, voice thin. "Guess I'm not winning firefighter of the month." I laughed too loudly because the sound kept me from crying. Skin is supposed to grow, to heal, to knit itself back into armor, but sometimes it refuses. Some grafts looked good pink alive. Others turned gray, edges curling like paper touched by flame. Each morning I searched his body for signs of hope and signs of loss. "Tell me a story," he said one night when sleep evaded him. "About what about us? The kind of story y'd play in your head when you thought we'd never talk about it." So I told him. About the first time I saw him carry a kid out of a burning duplex, sit on his cheek and light in his eyes. About the late shifts where our shoulders brushed in the truck and I memorized the weight of it. About how the world was always louder, harsher, until he spoke, and then it steadied. His eyes filled, not with tears exactly, but with something raw. That's the story I wanted to. The monitors ticked. The night nurse adjusted a line. I kissed his bandaged hand, careful of every wire, every fragile piece holding him here. "Marry me," he whispered again, voice breaking. "We already did," I said. "Back in that shed. The fire was our witness." He smiled, faint but true. Outside the window, dawn leaked in pale and merciless. The hospital woke with the shuffle of carts and the rustle of paper gowns. I leaned closer, my forehead resting against his. "Hold on," I said. "Just keep holding on." But the silence between the beeps told me he was slipping into a place even I couldn't follow. And for the first time since the flames surrounded us, I felt truly afraid. Hospitals measure time in beeps and drips, not in hours. By the fifth sunrise, the room had taught me both languages. Durek slept more than he woke. Pain braided into every breath. When he opened his eyes, he searched for me first, as if making sure the last good thing hadn't burned away with the rest. Fever arrived like an argument we couldn't win. A nurse tapped a thermometer and frowned. An attending ordered new labs, new antibiotics, new cautions. "We're watching for infection," he said, the way firefighters watch tree crown size up, jaw set. Some grafts look promising, some not yet. Not yet became the hinge of the day. I learned how to help the nurses without being in their way. Hand the saline, hold the line, talk when the room needed voice. The dressing changes were a ritual of patient cell airs unwrapped, the truth beneath revealed inch by inch. Pink islands where life had taken, dull, stubborn places where it hadn't. Durek almost never cursed, but when he did, it was for the parts that refused to learn his name. At night I read to him, Short chapters, clean sentence things that didn't ask too much of a tired brain. Sometimes I put on a quiet playlist, distant rain, a low river, wind in pines. That one, he whispered the first time the forest track played. Keep it on, it sounds like the ridge before the smoke. The charge nurse, a woman with eyes like solved puzzles, pressed a paper bag into my hands one afternoon. From the gift shop, she said, they don't sell hope, but they do sell ties. Only navy left. I laughed too quickly and then didn't laugh at all. The tie was simple, the kind you wear to City Hall and pretend you don't notice the way your hand shakes while you knot it. I set it in the drawer beside a hospital mug and a signed consent form, and told myself a drawer could be a sort of chapel. The surgeon returned with new maps. Well, take him back to the or tomorrow, she said, calm but not casual. Reassess, place additional grafts, revise what isn't integrating. He's strong, so are you. Strong felt like a word you earn by enduring, not by lifting. That night, Dirk woke to the sound of my chair scraping the floor, and smiled like it was a joke we'd planned. Tell me about the ring, he said. What ring? The one you'll pretend you hate because it's a little flashy, he murmured, eyes half closed. Silver or that warm metal that isn't quite gold. Platinum, I said, because I'd looked it up on my phone and memorized price ranges, like a person studying exits in a crowded room. Yours will knock when you put your hand on the table, mine will only hum, he breathed a soft laugh. Good, I don't want quiet. The second surgery took most of a morning and a piece of my patience. I paced the waiting area, counting ceiling tiles, then reset and counted floor squares. When they brought him back, pale and floating on the edge of anesthesia, I planted my hands on the bed rail to stop them from shaking. How'd we do? I asked the surgeon. Better in some areas, she said. Well, no more in 48 hours. In the meantime, pain control, watch the numbers, keep talking to him. She added lower, you make a difference. Don't underestimate that. I didn't. When he woke in ragged increments, I was there. I told him the rookies at the station had finally learned to coil hose properly. I told him the coffee machine still lied about being a latte maker. I told him my full name out loud, all of it, and what it would sound like if his last name lived beside mine. Fever spiked again on day 8. His breathing shortened, roughening at the edges. The nasal cannula traded for a mask that fogged with every exhale. The respiratory therapist coached him like a track runner. In, out, slow it down, let the machine help. He nodded as if he were nodding at me and not at plastic and pressure. That evening he drifted, then surfaced with sudden clarity. If I don't make it, he said, and I shook my head. Because language can betray you if you let it. No, I said, we already survived a fire that wanted our names. We're stubborn, he squeezed my fingers, bandages whispering against skin. If I don't listen, plant a tree on the ridge for me. Take rookies there and tell them about wind. Wear the tie on a day that isn't a funeral. Keep my mug. Don't stop going towards sirens. Some of them lead you home. I put my mouth to his bandaged knuckles, because chapel, because oath. Then you listen, I said. When your body forgets the sound of trees, it'll play them. When pain tries to speak for you, it'll argue until it's tired. When the day comes we sign our names, it'll pick cake you pretend to hate and you'll pretend to be mad. He smiled at the ceiling like there was a window there. Red velvet, he whispered, hate it. The night nurse dimmed the lights. Monitors stitched their green story across the screen, a simple line pretending it was simple to be alive. I set the navy tie on the bedside table where he could see it if he woke. He didn't. He slept hard and hot, fighting battles with both fists closed. By morning the numbers turned stubborn. Oxygen dipped and didn't rebound. A doctor spoke about lungs if they were hills with too much ash on them. Another dose, another mask, another almost. I stood where he could find me if his eyes opened and said his name often, not to wake him but to keep him. Here, midday, they asked me to step back as the room filled respiratory. You team, the calm choreography that means a decision has been made. We need to support his breathing more, someone said. Well, sedate and intubate, it's temporary. It gives the body a chance. They gave him a pen and a slate before the meds. His hand shook as he wrote, ghost, cursive beneath gauze and tape. He pushed it toward me, blue tie, don't leave. I said, and then they were counting backward with him, and he was gone into a sleep big enough to hold a forest. Tubes replaced words. Machines lent him air. The room got quieter in the wait. Rooms do when every sound matters. The nurse tucked the slate into the drawer beside the tie. I pressed my palm to his chest, careful of lines, and felt the slow drum under the borrowed breath. I pulled the chair closer. I put on the forest track. Pine and wind, a ridge before the smoke. I told him the story again, how hope once sounded like wings, and promised to play it on repeat until morning remembered how to arrive. Outside, day fell into evening. In the glass, my reflection hovered above his, two faces layered like a double exposure. I rested the navy tie across my knees and started to count the way we always had, one breath, then another, then another. A bridge built out of numbers, stretching toward a shore I could not see yet but refused to stop believing in. Nights had a different Darklian, humming, careful. Durek lay beneath warmers and white light, the ventilator breathing for him with a patience I tried to learn, the slate with his shaky blue tie. Don't leave sat in the drawer. I took the tie out and laid it across the blanket like a narrow horizon. He can hear you, the nurse said, adjusting a drip, even if he can't answer. So I talked. I told him shift gossip head pretend to hate. I told him I'd found a courthouse with a staircase perfect for photos, that I was practicing a half. Windsor head bully me into redoing. I played the forest track on repeat. Wind moved through Pine's memory moved through me. Day 10 turned into day 11, and the word infection took a seat in the room and wouldn't leave. The team came twice a day with careful faces. We're treating aggressively, said the attending. Some grafts are holding, some areas are failing. His lungs are working very hard. At noon they lightened the sedation to check his reflexes. His eyelids trembled. I leaned in until my forehead touched his. Hey, partner, I whispered. His hand twitched inside the dressing, a small, astonishing proof of him. Right here. They eased him back down. I stayed with the tie across my lap, practicing vows under my breath. I promised to count with you. I promised to go toward the siren if you're there. I promised to love the parts that ache and the parts that heal. When I ran out of words, I borrowed his. Make it simple. Blue tie, navy. By the 13th sunrise, the monitors wrote a stubborn store pressures edging wrong, oxygen numbers drifting, antibiotics stacked like sandbags. The surgeon stood at the foot of the bed and didn't look away. He's very sick, she said. We're doing everything. I know, I answered, because the truth asked to be named out loud. That evening, the sky over the parking lot turned the color of faded denim. I sat close and said my vows properly, not as a rehearsal, but as a ceremony with a witness of beeps. I, Ethan, take you, Durek, I whispered, to be the one I run toward, the one I run with. I'll keep your mug, I'll plant your tree, I'll wear the ridiculous ring and pretend I hate it. I'll carry your name in my pocket and your laugh in my throat. Blue tie. Don't leave. A tear slid from the corner of his eye and disappeared into the tape. Maybe it was fluid. I decided it was yes. Near midnight, a quiet gathered that wasn't only night. The ventilator's rhythm stuttered, alarms chimed once, then steadied. Nurses moved in a choreography ID begun to know fast, gentle, sure. The respiratory therapist adjusted settings, voice low, come on, man. Stay with us. I put my palm over his heart, careful of lines. We're stubborn, I said. Remember. We run through the gap, numbers dipped. Someone paged the intensivist. The room filled, the room shrank. A resident asked my name, I said it, both parts, because saying it with his felt like a wall I could lean on. They worked fluids, meds, small miracles done by practiced hands. I kept the forest playing, wind pines that ridged before smoke. The attending's eyes found mine. He didn't say him. Sorry, he said, talk to him, so I did. I gave him everything we hadn't had time to speak. You kept me brave, I said. You made the station feel like a house. You made the fire count us double. If you have to go, I'll carry both halves. I'll take rookies to the ridge and tell them about wind. I'll wear the tie on a day that is the funeral. I'll keep going toward sirens. Some of them lead you home. His chest rose under my hand, a delicate lift, a long, careful fall, another breath, another, then a space so wide the machines couldn't cross it. Someone silenced it. Alarm, the room exhaled. The surgeon's hand settled on my shoulder, human and steady. I pressed my face to the back of his bandaged hand and let the truth arrive without breaking it into smaller pieces. We had run as far as the corridor would go. We had loved each other in a shed where the roof held because a plane drew a line of water across the sky. We had promised City Hall and cake and rings that knock. We had counted together until numbers were not enough. The nurse folded the navy tie and placed it back in my palm, as if returning a flag. Take your time, she said, and the door clicked softly behind them. I sat until the forest track ended and started again. I counted a while longer, not because it could change anything, but because counting was how we built bridges. When I finally stood, the night outside was almost kind. The hallway smelled like coffee. Somewhere far away a siren rose and fell, headed toward strangers who needed saving. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would find a place for a tree. Tomorrow I would choose where to put a promise when the person it belongs to is gone. Tonight I tucked the slate into the drawer with the tie and rested my hand on the sheet where his should have been. I won't leave, I said, to the room, to the ridge, to the fire that had counted us twice. And then I walked into the quiet, carrying his name like an anchor that would teach me how to float. The funeral was small, because he would have wanted it that way. No speeches longer than a hose line, no flowers fancier than wild ones cut from the ridge. The department showed up in dress blues, boots polished, helmets under arms. I wore the navy tie. It shook when I nodded it, just like he guessed it would. I carried his mug in my pocket, heavy as steel. Chaplain spoke about courage, about service, about brothers in the fire. I thought about a shed filled with smoke, a kiss that burned truer than flames, a slate where he wrote "Don't leave." When they lowered the flag into my hands, I slipped the tie across it, not to surrender but to promise. I promised to plant his tree on the ridge. I promised to keep going towards sirens. I promised to tell rookies about the wind and how sometimes the only way out is through. After, when the crowd thinned and the sun bent low, I stayed at his stone. Ash still lived in the seams of my gear, smoke still lived in my lungs. I set the tie on the granite, straightened it as if preparing him for City Hall. I did what we said we'd do, I whispered. I counted every breath with you. Now it'll count for both of us. The evening air cooled. A breeze moved through the grass, carrying the faintest smell of pine. For a moment it sounded like the ridge before the fire, like hope with wings. I closed my eyes, saw his smile one last time, and walked away carrying him with me, step by step, into every tomorrow.